We have been our own worst enemy. To knowingly, willfully withhold pertinent information in the middle of a major, legitimate public policy discussion is long past unhelpful. That is just absolutely not acceptable. We need to be able to figure out how we do trade agreements that work to the mutual advantage of all parties. If the starting premise is that we're out to get somebody, that's not a good starting place, and it should also not be our place to just be a patsy.
Educate, inform, inspire. The Dan Parsons Show, a podcast that lifts up instead of tearing down.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Dan Parsons Show. I'm your host, Dan Parsons. Coming up on today's show, we welcome back John Hansen, president of the Nebraska Farmers Union and trade advisor to 3 United States presidents. But before I introduce John, a reminder to leave a comment on our YouTube page. As I mentioned in my introduction of Mr. Hansen, our YouTube channel continues to blow up. In fact, in just the past 90 days, we've had over 245,000 of you see one of our videos on YouTube. It's simply amazing. Come join the party. Okay, here's my conversation with the always entertaining John Hansen. Enjoy. Hey, it's my pleasure to welcome back to the show Mr. John Hansen, president of Nebraska Farmers Union. John, first of all, thanks for all the hard work you do on behalf of Nebraska agriculture, and thanks for taking time to visit with our audience again.
You bet. Glad to do it. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Just a reminder to our audience, the last time you were on the show, back in April, gosh, doesn't seem like it's been that long, talking about the Trump administration's trade war and tariffs. And I've told you this a few times, kept you up to date. But that episode about tariffs back in April has become one of the most viewed shows that we've had. In fact, my producer told me just earlier today, there have been over 40,000 impressions on the YouTube alone. So anyway, people like your golden tones and your handsome mug, Mr. Hansen.
As we'd say back home in Nima Grove, oofda.
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 Anyway, it's an important issue, all kidding aside. It continues to be, and certainly for a lot of segments of our economy, but certainly the ag economy here in Nebraska. This trade war continues to just baffle economists and people shaking their heads. And I think a lot of it is just the uncertainty of it. You know, one day we're here and the next day we're over here. And so anyway, just your initial thoughts, John, on where we're at with tariffs and this trade war.
I would say that we are in process, and that the process that we are in is largely unknown.
Still, yeah.
We're still struggling, and we're still trying to figure out what the plan is. And if we're going to do a reset of U.S. trade policy, which I think a lot of the Trump supporters and a lot of the non-Trump supporters would agree is something that has been long overdue, then we ought to be having a much more honest, a much more transparent, and a much more engaging conversation about what is it that we've been doing that has been working, what has not been working. And if we're going to do a reset, which a lot of people I think support, then where should we go? What should we do? How should we get there? What are our primary strategic economic interests as a nation? And how is it that we go about trying to do that? And let's try to have a much better process. And for those of us that have been working in public policy for a long time, the old saw is just that, because it's true, and that is that poor process usually begets poor policy. And for right now, we just don't have stakeholder engagement. We don't know who's on first. We don't know where second is. We have no idea if the guy on third is on our team or not. So everything is, out of all that confusion, then we're, in my opinion, that's why the uncertainty, especially in the ag sector, that is so susceptible to retaliation is so high.
Yeah, and maybe I should have done this in the intro, but just a reminder to our audience, John. I mean, you're no stranger to trade. You've been a trade advisor for a dozen or more years. To how many presidents?
14 years, 3 presidents.
Okay, yeah. So you've seen this issue a time or two, and this headline today, just a little while ago. The U.S. economy added 139,000 jobs in May, which that sounds good, but it's a slowdown compared to recent months, as this reporter said, as American businesses cope with the uncertainty about President Trump's continued trade war. So there again, we're just stumbling forward, or maybe more backwards, and just the uncertainty and of what's coming down the pike, and it's affecting the economy, starting to affect the economy.
Well, and so if you look at the size of the reach of the reset that the Trump administration is about, we have no guideposts to go by. We have no any comparable set of activities or actions really to compare that to. And the only one that I can think of that is remotely close would be when we passed NAFTA, and then within 2 years later we passed the World Trade Organization in order to be able to replace the GATT, which is the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And so those were we had at least been moving that direction and had been having a very robust public conversation about both of those things and whether they were good or not, what the consequences would be. So we had a lot more engagement. But those were kind of big posts to put in the ground to help, put up the guideposts of where we're going and kind of what we're doing. But in this particular case, we haven't had anywhere near that same discussion, and people are, not included. The stakeholders are not included. Agriculture is is critical to national security, critical to economic development and economic activity. It's an economic driver. It doesn't necessarily reflect the economy, although it sort of does, like a service sector. It is a primary driver, and it creates new wealth, new economic activity, new jobs, new taxes, new economic activity. And so ag is really important, but it's also very unique from, say, domestic manufacturing, although there are some common characteristics. So how we go about ag is in itself a very complicated and nuanced thing because of all the diversity within ag. And so, we have some commodities that we are net importers of. We have some we're net exporters of. We have some that we can certainly replace and grow more of ourselves. We have some that we can't. Bananas comes to mind.
Yeah.
So depending on the food item, the commodity item, we're a very large ag producing nation in the world, and we have a lot of natural resources. As you look at our whole footprint from east to west and north to south, and include Hawaii and Alaska and all of that, we've got an enormous footprint, so we can do a lot of different things. But we got to know, it's like I'm an old football player. It's really hard to run effective offensive plays if you don't know what the play is.
Yeah, and I wanted to get your opinion. That kind of dovetails into this story that I saw today. John, wanted to get your opinion on, because we do need information. We rely on solid information to guide our economic policies and ag policies. This story out of Politico. Trump. The headline is Trump officials delayed farm trade report over deficit forecast. The headline, or the lead is Trump administration officials delayed and redacted a government forecast because it predicts an increase in the nation's trade deficit in farm goods later this year, according to two people familiar with the matter. The numbers run counter to President Trump's messaging that his economic policies, including tariffs, will reduce U.S. trade imbalances. So the politically inconvenient data prompted administration officials to block publication of the written analysis normally attached to the report because they disliked what it said about the deficit. So that doesn't seem to be helpful.
It's far worse than not helpful. To knowingly, willfully withhold pertinent information in the middle of a major, legitimate public policy discussion is long past unhelpful. That is just absolutely not acceptable. And so we need to be able to use the facts that we have. We need to take a look at what we're doing. And like I said at the beginning, let's take a look at what's working. Let's take a look at what's not working. Let's take a look at what our options are. And we've not been well served in the past by the negotiation of side agreements. And so it seems that what Trump is doing is threatening across the board tariffs in order to facilitate side negotiations with all the different countries, kind of one at a time, to force them to the table. We're asking, what's the plan? And what are we going to do? And what are we going to do different than what we've done before that did not work? And so as a trade advisor, I was constantly in this awkward position where you're getting top security clearance rated information. You're trying to parse through it, figure out, what does this mean? Who is it that we're trying to do business with? Who are we trying to do a trade agreement with? What are, their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are they trying to sell us? What are we trying to sell them? How does this work out? Do we have a lot of competing interests as countries? Where are we relative to their ability to pay for our products? At the end of the day, I used to be in the bull business, and you can have the best breeding program, you can have the best nutrition program, you can have the best everything else, but until somebody actually buys a bull from you, you are not really in the bull business. You're just running a really expensive commercial cattle operation. And so who's going to be the buyer? Do they have the ability to pay for it? What are how do we work that out if they don't? Because if they don't have the economic wherewithal to be able to buy our products, then market access becomes a moot point. And so, we are a complicated nation. We have a lot of resources, and the world is complicated. And we need to be able to figure out how we do trade agreements that work to the mutual advantage of all parties. And so if the starting premise is that we're out to get somebody and we're out to take advantage of somebody, then that's not a good starting place. And it should also not be our place to just be a patsy. And we have been our own worst enemy on a lot of the trade agreements we did. So as a trade advisor, I'm saying to the head of USTR, we went to Congress. We said this was going to be a good trade agreement. We said that we think here's what the results are likely to be. And then, well, come to find out, it has not performed as predicted or promised. So what went wrong? And I was repeatedly told by multiple heads of the United States Trade Representative's Office, our chief trade negotiator, John, we look forwards, we don't look backwards. So at that point, we're just doing more of what didn't work before.
Yeah.
So there's still a bunch of that around. And so let's not be in a big hurry to cut a deal that's ill-considered, properly thought through, and is not in the strategic economic interest of not only ourselves, but our partners.
Yeah. Well, and having been involved in those trade negotiations and trade advisories, they take time, right? Some of these things take, I assume, months and months and maybe years to hammer out these agreements. And that's the other thing I think a lot of people are just scratching their head about is, the president says we're going to do 90 deals in 90 days or whatever that BS was. And I just can't imagine that that's how things get done.
Well, that's not how things would get done properly.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just slam stuff together, hope for the best. That's not a good strategy. These are complicated things, and there's far-reaching, complications. Some of the things that are longstanding issues with us that we would hope to get addressed is that when I started out as as a trade advisor, the only country that I can remember that had value-added taxes was India. And so India was like, well, they're not kind of doing stuff like the rest of us, the major industrialized nations in the world. And so, but it's just kind of India. And so over the years, we've seen more and more nations move to what we call VATs, value-added taxes. And so a lot of those value-added taxes are in about the 18% area. So if you have two countries that are kind of on the same page relative to their VAT structure, they're 16 to 20%, or they're 1 or 2% off, going back and forth, one VAT offsets the other. And so that value-added tax is sort of kind of comes out in the wash in a fairly neutral way. But when one country has a fairly high VAT and the other country has none, and that would be the U.S., we do not have VATs. And also because our currency is unlike the currency in the rest of the world, and that our currency is the currency that is the world's currency. There's some discussion about that these days, but it has been a fact. And so when you have a high value dollar, that puts us at a competitive disadvantage. So that gets to be, so by the time you add the VAT and then the strength of the dollar, if the strength of the dollar is high and you add the two of them together, the next thing you know, you're in the 25 to 35% differential. So we have not had a strategy to deal with that. And so the thought has struck me that the across the board blanket use of tariffs is being used as a way to offset the fact that we do not have a value-added tax. So given what tariffs are and given how you can use them and the different kinds of tariffs that are available, it has a kind of offset characteristic to it, but it's not necessarily the best tool in the toolbox probably to deal with that. And with it, there's also going to be a whole bunch of additional impacts that the tariff itself is going to create, because across the board tariffs, as opposed to strategic tariffs, have a very different kind of effect. And so all of a sudden you're going to get a lot of downstream impacts. So when you look at the size of our economy with across the board higher tariffs, we're going to be paying for it. And it's going to slow up the economy. And that's going to be fairly short term and medium term. And if you're talking about reinvesting in America and bringing other kinds of industries back home, that is a long-term thing. And it's also a long-term thing that absolutely depends on whether or not there is certainty and dependability before there's financial investment. Right? So we're creating an atmosphere where everybody's thinking short-term, everybody's, rightly trying to just protect themselves from further damage, making sure they aren't put out of business. And so you got to go a long ways toward certainty and predictability in order to be able to get the kind of investment that I think that a lot of people would like to see. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, John, about Congress. I know you, farmers, your organization and yourself, you have a great relationship with our delegation. I know they work hard for the ag industry here in Nebraska. I know you are out there. I know you were just out there recently back in Washington talking to some of our delegation. What are you telling them, or what are they telling you? What's their role in this? Just what's the outlook of the role of Congress and our delegation in this issue?
Well, the primary focus of our recent trip to Washington as a part of our targeted fly-in earlier in May was to deal with the really kind of critical and immediate business of the Farm Bill.
Yeah.
And so, we've kicked the can down the road 3 times. We had farmers and ranchers that unfortunately did not get their farm operating loans renewed this year. Those are usually lead to bankruptcy or the end of the farming operation and major changes in business structure and lives, and so these are a tough time. So we're trying to focus on what can Congress do to deal with a growing financial crisis in rural America. And the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. Who would be holding them back from getting a farm bill done? Well, budget reconciliation is a big part of that. So while we got into trade a little bit in some of the conversations that we had with some of the delegation members, we were primarily focused on budget reconciliation. And so trying to get the whole farm bill moved forward, a comprehensive, robust farm bill, which we need, is hard to come by when you take some of the parts of the farm bill that are more critical or attractive to competing interests, and you pull them out and you run them through budget reconciliation. And so when you do that, you make the coalition that supports the whole package together, which is the way we've been doing this for some considerable time, at risk because you've already pulled out some of the key elements that were more of some of the have-tos, and you're running it. If you can get it through budget reconciliation, getting it through the Senate is different than the House.
Yep.
The House does not have the Byrd rule, and the Byrd rule says that you're going to only be able to run those things through that have dollar signs tied to them, not policy.
Yep.
And so then the question of whether or not it is policy or whether or not it is just dollar signs is called, as you know, in the Senate, the Byrd bath. And so one of my favorite expressions. So, is it or is it not a policy driven, or are we just, taking something that ran out of money and giving it new money? So there's a bunch of things in the Farm Bill that you could just give it more money because it's working okay. But there's a whole bunch of things in the Farm Bill that really need to be fixed and improved that are not just tied to dollar signs. They're tied to policy changes so that we update things and make things work better. So if you, the president, a lot of different folks have kind of hinted at this, including the chairman of the Senate Ag Committee, Senator Bozeman, who said that a skinny farm bill, where you pull out a few key pieces and run it through budget reconciliation, makes it harder to pass a comprehensive farm bill that we need. And we agree with him on that. And so, we're complicating all of those kinds of things. And in the case of ag, unlike a whole bunch of other sectors in the economy, some would probably sneak in under the door there, but a lot of them are really fundamentally different than ag. In the case of trade policy, the WTO has already been used by the international cartel of economic interests and the grain traders, et cetera, to go through and take those tools out of the domestic farm policy toolbox that would cause the price of ag commodities to go up. So all of those, that's trade, that is price distorting. So they've been able to control that process. So all the farm policy tools that we use that cause prices to go up for farmers are trade distorting. So we can't do that anymore because that's, forbidden in the WTO. But all those things that cause commodity prices to go down to farmers, well, that's just good business. So we have a really uneven culling of what's in the toolbox and what's not. But a lot of those things that would cause us to be able to do the traditional things we've done in farm policy to run much more economically effective farm programs that cost a fraction of the money we're spending now, we're not able to use because of the WTO. So if we're going to do a reset of trade policy, I'm all for it. Let's talk about those things.
Yeah.
And why should you deny countries the ability to be able to set and implement their own domestic farm policies, which are, when you look at it, also national food security policies?
Yeah. one of the last topics, John, that I wanted to chat with you about in relationship to this trade war is the topic of bailout again. In Trump's first term, amid a smaller, admittedly much smaller trade war with China, the government rolled out tens of billions of dollars in farm subsidies. The Trump administration did. Those bailouts collectively ended up being so large that they almost equaled the tariff revenue that was generated. This is what the American Soybean Association economist Jackie Hollins said. She said, trade aid isn't going to be farmers' first choice for a solution of all this. Farmers prefer to earn their money from the markets, she said. The farm economy has shifted, as you know, dramatically since 2018. Higher inflation rates has set prices for fertilizer, seed, and other inputs soaring. Increased interest rates, as you know, and prices for major crops, as you well know, soybeans and corn have plummeted, according to my notes here, 40% since just 2022, partly because of Trump's first trade war reshaped the global market for major competitors. So anyway, and there's talk again about having a bailout for farmers to take care of the pain that this trade war is going to impose on them. And Caleb Ragland, the president of the American Soybean Association, said in a story just recently, he's also a Kentucky farmer, said, "We don't have any margin of error. We're going to lose a generation of young farmers." Your thoughts on, the first bailout that apparently we are still paying for, and now the prospects that Trump's going to come in and do another one?
So the first iteration of tariffs, the way they were done, caused China to substantially change their view of buying U.S. soybeans, among other things. But let's just focus on soybeans. So what was the consequence of that? Well, there's a product that we produce in surplus that needs to find a home and a use for. And so China was by far our biggest customer. And so all of a sudden they went from looking at us as a preferred customer, as instead of saying, when we need soybeans, we'll knock on the U.S. door first, to when we need soybeans, we now are looking at the U.S. as the source of last resort. So we knock on their door last, and only if we can't find the rest of what we need somewhere else in the world. And so that loss of that kind of market was part of the reason for the bailout and the reason it was so badly needed. But the bailout, for as expensive as it was, a couple things to remember about it. One is that the bailout went to folks that it should have never gone to in the first place. That JBS didn't need it, shouldn't have gotten it.
The big corporations.
Yes,
yeah.
Large, not even U.S. corporations, foreign-based corporations, some of the wealthiest corporations in the world. That was not who the bailout should have gone to. So there was a real problem in terms of who got it. And so a lot of the folks who needed it more, got less. And some of the folks who needed it the least, had their snoot in the trough first. And so there was a distribution problem. And then, of course, we didn't really get all of the market value that we lost was not replaced. A good chunk of it was, but it was not a dollar for dollar offset. And three, that the market that we lost as a result of China's change in perspective is still lost. That's a bill that gets paid every year by U.S. soybean producers. That market is gone. And so what did China do? China said, okay, if that's the way you're going to play, two can play that game. And so they have been in South America making very substantial financial investments in the infrastructure of Brazil and Argentina.
Yeah.
So where do you think that they're going to be buying their future soybeans and corn and other things from? where they've made their investments. And so they are helping our competition steal our market share. Thank you very little to the last iteration of tariffs. So now you come in with an across the board thing relative to China, and you look at how this could play out. They have already just said overnight, sorry, we're not buying any more beef from the U.S.
Yeah.
For example. And so you look at the financial uncertainty of this. Are we in a? I mean, we have not been able to get a farm bill passed now for some time. We've never had a farm bill delayed this long ever before, and part of it is we couldn't agree on how to pay for it. So with all of this deficit spending and all of the budget hawks and the situation that's out there, do we really think that the government is going to belly up to the bar and say, we'll just pick up the tab over here now for all the lost market value this time around for ag? I don't see that. I don't see that same atmosphere. I don't see that same situation. I see a declining financial pinch that's going on across the board in Congress and deficits generally. So if you're going to incur losses and you're not going to be willing to offset those losses, and we're already in financial trouble, the head of the soybean growers set it straight, because we're going to lose farmers. We're going to put folks out of business, and the folks that are the most vulnerable are the ones who have the least equity, and those would be the young farmers that we're trying to get started farming.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a great picture, John, of the importance that this whole issue is to Nebraska and the work that you're doing in Nebraska Farmers Union to help those small farmers and to represent them. And so thanks for your work. And man, it doesn't get any easier, does it?
No, it doesn't. And we're in a very difficult situation. It's one thing to have to start looking at equity and saying we're going to have to tap into that equity and borrow money. We're going to go into debt, and we're going to use the cash that we get by doing that to be able to make up for the cash flow that did not work in the first place, right? So we have to meet our financial obligations to our lenders. And so you do that 1 year, you don't like it, but you've got plenty of equity. You're in shape to still stay in business and keep going forward. But when you do that 2 years, and then you do that 3 years, and now you're looking at, in some cases, 4 years, at that point, I joke, but it's really not funny. But I keep saying that the two most likely places where farming careers are going to come to an end is with the decision of either your banker or your spouse or both.
Yeah.
Right. And you can't blame the banker for, saying that there's a limit to how much debt you can assume and how much equity you can use up when you're not cash flowing. And the same can be said for your spouse, who's saying, look, we've worked our whole lifetime here. We should be getting ready to retire. Instead of that, we're borrowing more and more money and we're going backwards.
Yeah.
And so, there are limits to how long you can use borrowed money to offset market value that you didn't get.
Yeah.
So then, what could we be doing in trade policy if we really wanted to do a reset? We could do a bunch of things. Haven't heard those conversations. Haven't heard any of that discussion. So again, poor process almost always ends up producing a poor policy. And that's what worries me, is that I don't see those, and I don't hear those discussions out where they need to be. And so the fact that that's the case, that causes folks like me to be more concerned.
Yeah.
And so more voices need to come to the party, and we need to say, if you're impacted, I keep telling folks it's the moral obligation of the stuck pig to squeal. And if we're heavily impacted, we need to be squealing.
We need to be squealing a little louder.
A little louder. Yeah.
A little louder. Well, John Hansen, Longtime president, Nebraska Farmers Union. I appreciate you, my friend. Appreciate the hard work that you still do on behalf of agriculture here in Nebraska. And we'll keep watching this. We'll keep in touch, my friend. And any parting words? Tell us a fun story on our way out the door here.
Well, I'm not so sure about fun stories, but I do wanted to make sure that I thank you for doing all the stuff that you do and trying to get good conversations had, good questions asked. The whole idea of a free society, a democracy, depends on the free flow of information, and the whole idea of having good, dependable information on which to make decisions, and having the atmosphere. And so I've been doing this kind of energizer buddy talk that I've been doing for all these many years, and as I've been doing youth camps and all of that, I keep saying, that you can't run a successful democracy without civil society. And that civil society has everything to do with doing all of those things that a lot of kids should have learned from their parents and grandparents before they made kindergarten. And that is, if you want to have friends, be a good friend. If you want to have good neighbors, be a good neighbor, and be respectful of other people and their viewpoints. And so our civil society needs to be really kind of at the top of our brains these days, and say, okay, how do we talk about complicated and difficult things, but do it in a respectful, thoughtful kind of way, because our democracy at the end of the day depends on that.
Yeah. Well, amen, brother.
So
yeah,
we need what you do for our democracy, Dan.
Well, thanks, John. I appreciate that. But yes, we need to have this conversation. We need to do it in a civil tone, and that's what we're trying to do here. So, yep, I appreciate you very much.
Good for you.
Yeah, you bet.
You're my good story. Thank you.
Hey, thanks to the Parsons team who made this show possible. Chase Porter, executive producer. Ike Samanis, producer and graphic design. Penology Tech Solutions for their technical help and equipment. And Kim Remington, Parsons PR's Director of Operations. And thanks to each of you for tuning in today and for your support. That's the show. Thanks for tuning in. Now go do good things. I'm Dan Parsons.